Hey, it's Dan Morales, and this is Homebuyer Radio. This is episode 119, and I've been trying to nail down frequently asked questions for clients, and one that I just recently ran into. Now, and I'm kind of surprised that I actually get this question from some clients because you would think it's common sense, but I guess there's a lot of parts of this mortgage process that aren't always common sense. But one of the questions I always get asked is, how come I have to have so much cash to close? Okay, you have a down payment. For most programs, the smallest down payment is anywhere from, let's say, 3 to 5% for most, let's say, conventional types of programs. Okay, so let's just say you're buying a house for $100,000. Your 3% down payment would be $3,000. In the case of a 5% down payment, it'd be $5,000. So people are always surprised to know that, okay, great, no problem. I can come up with my $3,000 or my $5,000. But then when you explain to them that there are more dollars needed in addition to your down payment, they're surprised. Like, well, wait a minute, what do you mean there's more money that's needed than just my down payment? Well, you have closing costs, okay? Closing costs would be the cost for like an appraisal and title insurance and closing fees with the title companies, potentially surveys, processing costs, credit reports, flood certifications, all kinds of stuff that are part of the process of documenting your file for approval that are costs that add up relatively fast. In addition to that, if you're doing a down payment that's less than 20%, you typically have to fund an escrow account for taxes and insurance. Now, that escrow account, depending on when you close and how the taxes break down for the property, can in some cases be several $1,000s of additional cost on top of your down payment and then on top of your actual closing cost. So, here in the part of Michigan that I'm located in, it is not uncommon for somebody to have a couple $1,000s, let's say, in closing cost and anywhere from, another $1,500 to even $2,000 in escrows and prepaid interest cost. And in addition to that, you typically have to pay for your first full year worth of homeowners insurance at the time you close on your new house. So you can have somebody who has, let's just say, a $100,000 house, a 3% down payment of $3,000, but then they have closing costs and escrows and the first year of homeowners insurance and just their overall fees, if you will, to be able to get the transaction closed. That is another $4,000. All right. So in that case, instead of having, let's say, just your 3% down payment of $3,000, you got to have $7,000 in total. Okay. So, and clients, of course, are freaked out. Like, well, why do I have to have so much money when this is all said? I don't understand, why I have all of these costs. Well, you have a cost as part of getting a mortgage. And one of the things I talked about in previous episodes is, how interest rate and closing costs go hand in hand, okay? So you can have, a higher interest rate and your closing costs are lower. You can have a lower interest rate and higher closing cost, because sometimes what you can do is you can take a higher interest rate in exchange for the bank paying some of your closing cost for you. Sometimes you can negotiate to have the seller to pay closing cost as part of the transaction. Now, in a really competitive marketplace where, especially if you're a first-time home buyer and you're really competitive marketplace, it can be really tough to get a seller to pay closing cost for you. And in all honesty, it could put you at a competitive disadvantage when you're in the process of, trying to buy a house or write an offer, because if you're competing against 10 other offers and those 10 other offers don't have any form of seller paid closing cost as part of what they're doing, but you're asking for seller paid closing cost as part of what you're doing, you're probably not going to get, you're not going to win that deal, unless you're paying way more for the house, let's say. But even in that case, you likely still wouldn't win the deal, because then you could have some potential issues with an appraisal, and in many cases, a good sharp realtor is going to recognize that, right? And it's just going to put your offer at a disadvantage compared to somebody else. So that, when you look at it, how much cash you have to have it closed, and this goes back to having realistic expectations. I have some clients that, they get angry and they get upset with you that they've got to pay closing costs and escrows and the first year worth of homeowners insurance and stuff like that. Don't shoot the messenger, guys. Okay, that's just par for the course of what you have. Now, there are some ways to try to creatively buy out of some of that, but those can also be longer term, more expensive options that may not necessarily be the best for you as part of what you're doing. So that's why, we make this podcast available, right? We're at, episode 119. There's 119 episodes of, just a lot of solid information to try to educate you as you get ready to go through this mortgage process and understand kind of what you're up against as part of buying a house. That's why I do this podcast. I do this podcast to educate you, to hopefully help inform you on how to navigate through the mortgage process. But in all honesty, the easiest way to make it through this process is just to work with us directly. Like I said in previous episodes, we lend in all 50 states. Pretty much most programs are available in most states, but we have the ability to lend in all 50 states. And if you are in the process of getting ready to buy a house and you want to work with a good, seasoned mortgage loan officer that actually knows what they're doing, we'd love to work with you. That's the whole reason why we do this podcast. Hey, again, my name is Dan Morales. I go by Dan, the Mortgage Man. You can find me online at danmorales.com. That's DANMORALEZ.com. My NMLS number is 709729. You can call me at 616-931-4629, or you can even text me at that number, 616-931-4629. You can also find me online at pretty much every social media site. You can find me at Dan Morales or Dan the Mortgage Man. You can check us out on Instagram, Instagram TV. We do this podcast on a video form that you'll find there every week as well, too. And then, if you can do me a favor, make sure you share the podcast. If you know somebody who's getting ready to buy a house and they just really want good, honest answers to their questions, I hope that you'll find this podcast is an awesome tool for that, right? I know it's reaching a lot of you. There's several thousand of you that are listening every week, it's the audience continues to grow week after week, and it's growing all throughout the U.S., which is really awesome. It's just fun to kind of see the reach that we're able to have in being able to do that. So, hey, do me a favor, make sure you share the podcast, write us a review on iTunes, let other people know about the podcast, and just help to get the word out there. Just thanks for listening, and just remember, North Point Bank is an equal housing lender.